This presentation will guide you as you work on your narrative or story for your dedication book. First off, we need to talk about the difference between a story and a vignette. A story, which is what we wrote earlier this year, follows narrative structure and tells a complete tale. A vignette, on the other hand, follows a narrative structure but only presents a short scene or one single incident. It's very descriptive, and it's what you need to write for this book because a vignette tends to be far shorter than a story. Remember, you're looking to write 1 to 1.5, 1 to 2 pages for this. Let's take a minute to remember narrative structure, or in other words, the structure of a story. It begins with a lead and then exposition, where we expose the main elements of the story, the character, the setting, the main conflict. Next comes the rising action. There won't be a lot of it in a vignette, and it leads to the climax, the key part. After that, maybe a little falling action, and then the resolution, where the story is wrapped up. Let's look at each of these in more detail. The story beginning has 2 parts, the hook or lead and the exposition. Remember we learned about 3 different kinds of leads back when we were writing stories? There's a thinking lead, a dialogue lead, or an action or doing lead. All of these are meant to hook the reader. And then you move into the exposition, where you introduce the main characters, the setting, and the main conflict. Remember, you don't have a lot of writing space in this assignment, so keep things fairly simple. Once you've got your story started, you move into the rising action. That is what happens as the main character attempts to solve the main conflict. But again, you're not going to have a lot of space or time to have a lot happen. Your rising action in this instance might actually just be one thing. However, that rising action should lead to a climax, which is the moment of greatest intensity, the point at which the main conflict has to be resolved one way or another. This is the key moment in a vignette and should probably take up most of the space in your story. After the climax, after that exciting or intense moment, comes any falling action that may occur, and then the final resolution. Remember, solving or resolving a conflict does not mean there has to be a happy ending. Now that we've reviewed all of the elements of a narrative or story structure, I'd like you to take a minute and read an example vignette. You can find this in Moodle. It is, I believe, 2 PDF files, 2 pages long. Take some time to read it and look for all of the elements of a story that we just discussed. When you've finished, return here and we'll move on. Here's what I hope you noticed as you read through that example vignette. It hooked you in with some very detailed description that moved rapidly into some action and thought shots, what was going on around the main character and within her own mind. We met the main character, were introduced to an external conflict, and found out about our setting, all in the first 2 paragraphs. And within the first third of the story, we found our main conflict as well, which was an internal quandary about why was it this character had taken on this job that drove her crazy. Then we had some rising action, which involved actually a flashback to childhood, and then meeting up with a former teacher. The bulk of the story was the climax, remembering being in the former teacher's classroom, what it was like, what she appreciated about it, what she learned from it. And all of this brought us to the falling action, when the 2 women need to separate, and the resolution, when the main character realizes why it is she has this job that drives her crazy. It had a lot to do with that former teacher of hers. There's some other things to remember while writing a great narrative. Dialogue needs to be included. People talk to each other. That's what we do. We are social creatures. Include those words. Remember to include thought shots so we know what characters are thinking and feeling. Snapshots and exploding moments, descriptions, slow down that time. Help us be in your moment. Use juicy words and figurative language to show us your readers instead of tell us about it. If you go back, you will find all of these in the example that I provided for you as well. And then you should be ready to create your own vignette for your dedication book. When it's finished, remember to come and share it with me.